Hello and welcome to today's episode in our new HG and employment series. My name is Faye and I'm the fundraising officer and former peer support volunteer at Pregnancy Sickness Support. The impact of hyperemesis can be so profound that sufferers often require hospitalisation as well as help to take care of themselves every day. I know firsthand just how debilitating HG can be. In my first pregnancy, while suffering with HG, I didn't leave my bed for a month. So it's not surprising to hear that many women are unable to work because of their HG. Throughout this series, I'll be exploring the theme of HG and employment, and we'll be chatting with sufferers and maternity rights experts. Many sufferers feel deeply misunderstood by their employer, but I'm pleased to say that today my guest had a really happy experience with the treatment that she received from her employer. Leanne, thank you so much for joining me.
Hello.
So let's get started. So tell me a little bit about what you do for a living, Leanne.
So I work for an IT company. I've worked there for nearly 10 years now. Time flies. I work as a head of business development. I have a team of staff, and basically we explore all different avenues of our existing customers. We look for new customers, and our job is to go out and visit those customers. So a lot of our role is to be on customer site, which takes me pre-children all around the UK and parts of Europe. So a really variety in terms of jobs. No 2 days are ever the same. And I absolutely love my job. I really do. And I think I'm very fortunate to be speaking to you today with a positive story around something that is pretty horrific, as most people that have suffered with HG will I'm absolutely sure relate to. So yeah,
definitely. So tell me about your HG. When did it start?
It started so I've had HG both pregnancies. My first was in 2018. Didn't really know anything about HG. I'd seen that Kate Middleton had it, which I guess is a well publicised story, but didn't think anything else of it. Got to around about 5 weeks pregnant and started with severe nausea. And really, I just thought I'd never been pregnant before. I didn't know. So I just thought it was normal morning sickness and was kind of trying to deal with that. A couple of days into that kind of 5 week period, I very quickly realised that actually I was pretty sick and had to call in sick to work. And as I mentioned, I've worked for that employer for 10 years and it was probably my first ever phone in sick day, which was all fine. But my mum quickly intervened and said there's something not quite right and I think you need some help. So I ended up at A&E, at which point somebody, one of the medical staff had told me that I was probably suffering a miscarriage and that it was just one of those things. And I was incredibly upset and devastated, as you can imagine. Fortunately, somebody else had come to see me and said, perhaps we can see if she can get onto the gynae ward and they can have a look. And I feel emotional talking about this because I'm forever grateful that person intervened, because I went to the gynae ward and was very quickly diagnosed with hyperemesis. I was given a scan and shown that the baby, or the fetus at that point, was absolutely still there, alive and kicking, even though it was very early in the pregnancy. I wasn't really given any guidance around what that truly meant. I was just put on a drip and sent home.
So no medication at that time?
No medication, just literally given because the ketone measurement was high, I think +3. So they just rehydrated me and sent me home. In 2018, it was May time and it was absolutely roasting hot. I remember it very well. Literally 2 days later after being home, I just completely relapsed and ended up back at A&E again. I mentioned the heat because I just sat for hours in A&E being sick or feeling terribly sick. I wasn't sick throughout the whole time. Same process, ended up back onto the gynae ward, and this time started some medication. So I was given cyclazine and ondansetron this time. So that helped a little bit and seemed to get on top of it. Stayed in for a couple of days this time, came back out again. Just the same thing over and over again, until eventually it was agreed that I would have a program where I could freely go into the hospital and just sit on a drip for 4 hours alongside the medication. And that really helped me. It gave me that comfort that when I felt terrible, because I literally couldn't eat, like most women, I couldn't eat anything, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't drink anything. So every time I came home, the same thing just happened over and over again. It was just like a horrific nightmare.
Cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And anybody that's had it will completely understand that feeling of where you're so desperate, you want to have a drink. And my mum was going, well, can you not just take a little sip? And I was like, I can't explain it, but I can't. So without that hospitalisation and that help there, I think I would have been, a lot worse than I was.
Can I just ask what hospital that was?
It was Warrington Hospital, Warrington General, yeah.
So how does working fit into all of this? Presumably we're off work for a considerable period of time.
The short answer to that question is that it doesn't. I had absolutely no choice but to tell my boss that I was pregnant. So fortunately, myself and my partner, we both work for the same company. That's how we met. So he liaised with my boss and said, she's pregnant, but she's got hyperemesis. No idea what that was, but fortunately he was able to explain a little bit about what it was, because at this point now we'd found pregnancy sickness support, thank God, who had tried to help us.
And had you guys found all the resources? Because online we've got the resources that say how to explain it to your employer,
yes.
What the condition is. Did you sort of go in armed with that info?
Yes, we did. So we had all of that detail. And to be fair, I'm not sure that we really needed it, because my boss was incredibly understanding about the situation. And I think, as I'd worked there for a long time as well, I think he knew that for me to be off for this sustained period of time, it was bad. And it really wasn't just morning sickness.
So how many weeks pregnant are you in this part of the story?
Probably around about 10, 11 weeks, something like that. So I'd not even got to the 12-week scan. I mean, I had to tell him probably around about 6 weeks, because I'd already been off for a week and they knew I was in hospital, but we were trying not to say, because we weren't sure what was happening and I didn't want to tell anybody, and especially because I'd gone in and someone had said, oh, I might be having a miscarriage, and I wasn't ready. I really wasn't ready to tell people that I was having a baby. Our journey getting to that was quite stressful in itself, so I just wasn't emotionally prepared to tell the world. But I was forced to, because of hyperemesis, like many women are, because it's that debilitating that you physically can't work. So
it's like you just disappear, isn't it? It's like you disappear and everybody's asking, where are you? And you can't, you don't know. You're told, aren't you, you mustn't say that you're pregnant before you're 12 weeks, and people are so worried about you, and you're so isolated.
Yeah, it's very lonely, isn't it?
It's so difficult.
Yeah, I think that isolation, that loneliness is horrendous, and even though you are there, you're not there, because I think after the physical symptoms take its toll, it becomes a mental battle the longer it goes on. And for me, it went on for, fortunately, and I say this now, probably not thinking that at the time, but it probably went until about 18 weeks or something like that, which is still a long and sustained period of time to be off work. But there was nothing I could do about that.
Were you off work that entire time, Leanne? From 5-6 weeks to 18 weeks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at the time, during that period of time, when I say about my employer being fantastic, they really were. So my contact with them was limited, which was nice, because there was no pressure, no harassment on anything. On my work was picked up by my boss, who literally just picked it up and ran with it. Didn't even, there was no, oh, I'm not sure, so I'll just phone you. There was none of that whatsoever. It was literally like I had left for a period of time and they knew I was coming back at some point. So they picked up everything for me. And when I started to feel better and had got a better medication plan, I literally phoned and said, I'm feeling a lot better, but I still can't travel. I still couldn't get in the car unless I absolutely had to go to hospital. There was no way I was getting in a car for a choice. And so I was allowed to work from home, and I was allowed to pick and choose what hours. The only request was, can you just tell me if you logged on and then you're going to be logging off? And that's exactly what I did. And because it was at my own pace, I didn't have any pressure or feel any pressure from them to suddenly be back and doing work when I still didn't feel like I could, because the medication obviously has side effects as well, in terms of it making you quite drowsy. Still eating was a problem, so I become quite weak quite quickly. So I might be able to do an hour or 2 hours, and then I would log off and go to sleep for a little bit, get back up and maybe log on again and do another hour, and they were absolutely fantastic with that.
And did you work that way, Leanne, through up until you had baby, or did it become a bit more gradual that actually maybe you could go to the office or you could do a bit longer at work?
Yeah, so around about October time, from finding out I was pregnant in May, I started to go back a little bit to the office. So it was sporadic, and again at my choice. And I can remember being sat in a meeting, and our managing director was in there, and I really fancied something to eat, and I was like, "Do you mind if I just eat this sandwich?" Because it was quite an important meeting, and he was just like, "Oh my God, please just sit there and don't speak, just eat it, just do it." And I felt really, like, again, comfortable with that, because I felt like they understood it's a privately owned company, and I felt like they really understood what I was going through. So yeah.
So Leanne, how did they manage to get it so right? Was there somebody in the organisation that had it before, or do you think you just got lucky that everybody there was really understanding and let you take it at your own pace?
Yeah, no, nobody had it before in the organisation. The managing director had a friend whose wife had it, which I think helped. And I feel like it's important to say that. And whilst I don't have any direct contact with him per se, my own boss had never heard of it, didn't understand it. And he was brilliant. He was just absolutely brilliant. And I think because maybe because I was able to explain it via my partner, fortunately, it was a lot easier, because I'm not sure how I would have explained that if I'd had to pick up the phone and have a discussion with him. And I remember trying to, and him saying, "Okay, it's fine." He was like, "But let's just get off the phone now." And he was pushing me, probably because I was on that much medication that I probably wasn't making much sense. But I felt that I needed to. I felt like
I relate to that.
Yeah. I felt like I needed to say something, because I've been quiet for months on end. But yeah, I think that was at the later stages when I was starting to feel a little better. So
I think if you haven't, if all you know of it is seeing Kate Middleton in the press, I think that it's very difficult for people to understand. I know I would speak to people at my work, and they would just be like, "Well, I wasn't pregnant. I wasn't sick when I was pregnant," and I was like, "Well, that's great. I can't stop being sick," and it was very, very difficult to explain how severe it was.
Yeah,
So
I probably had the slight opposite, where I had a lot of people telling me that they'd had it, or their mum had it.
okay, yeah.
And that was quite frustrating,
Yeah.
because I felt like I was then trying to point statistics out to say it only affects a really small number of women, or I would then find myself going, "Oh, did she go to hospital? Oh no, she didn't go to hospital." Right, okay. And I'm not poo-pooing if anybody didn't have to go to hospital, but generally speaking, from anybody that I've supported, they always end up in hospital, or certainly under the GP, because it's without hospitalization, I'm not sure what that end outcome looks like for the sufferer, because literally can't do anything, can you? So yeah.
Oh my word. Well, so do you have any advice for anybody that is suffering from HG at the moment?
I think my only advice is that somehow, somewhere, pregnancy sickness support needs to be found, because actually without them both times, both pregnancies for me, I needed their help and support. I needed that information the first time round to be able to speak to my employer, and without it, I'm not sure how I would have, or how we would have explained what it was that was happening to me, and also things around, your legal rights as a sufferer. Those are really critical pieces of information. So I would say ignore any Google searches of random people talking about it. Go and find the research if you can beforehand, and just arm yourself with as much information as you possibly can.
And Leanne, did both of your pregnancies look the same?
In terms of hyperemesis?
Yeah.
Yes. And the second time round, I felt like I was ready for it. When I say I was ready, as I thought I was anyway, until it kicked in. This time I tried to get medication beforehand, and was prescribed cyclizine, and it didn't, without the other medications, it didn't do anything. It didn't touch the sides. And again, 5.5 weeks in, exactly the same thing happened. But this time I knew where to go. I just needed the GP to phone the ward and say I was coming in. but it was
so
COVID.
It was Warrington Hospital you went back to.
Yeah.
Therefore in the same place. Yeah.
I mean, because of COVID this time, it was slightly different because my partner couldn't stay with me, and that was quite frustrating. And depending on which medical staff you got would depend on the day. I was admitted on a Sunday on one of the times, and it was my second admission, and the person that was on said, I'm not doing anything, I'm not giving you anything until you do me a urine sample. To which I was like, I haven't drank anything now for 3 days. I haven't passed
Not going to be able to give it to you.
So I can't give it to you. And I was sobbing. And my partner had had to leave because of COVID, and I could hear him in the corridor trying to explain everything that was going on. And I was just begging to be put on a drip and given some medication. I had to have more medication this time, and there was talk about steroids the second time round because I couldn't get on top of it. But my choice, I chose to just continue with 4 different types of medication instead. So, and again, back to sort of the topic in hand, my employer was fantastic. This exactly the same thing, was off for virtually 3 months. Because it was COVID, it doesn't matter as much around the working from home thing because that was standard at the time. But the same principles around not being harassed, not feeling stressed, having that flexibility, and gradually being able to rebuild up my workload. Because the other thing on both occasions, and I suppose is an important point, is that when I did come back, it wasn't like, oh, Leanne's back, so here's all her work. It was more of a, well, catch up on your emails, and if you have time, have a little look at this. It was very, very drip feed, almost like being a new starter, where you get given tasks as you go along. So yeah.
So it's like a phased return, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, Leanne, thank you so much for joining me today. It's really nice to
pleasure.
hear a story where somebody's felt like they've been really well supported, not just by PSS, but by their employer as well. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
If you or someone you care about is suffering from HG, please visit pregnancysicknesssupport.org.uk for information on our services, as well as details on how you can get involved through fundraising or volunteering.